Hi, this is Pete from GS2. On my screen I've got a website that I wandered into, I don't know, 3-4 years ago when I first started looking at this sort of thing. I had retired and found out I needed to do something with my brain. And I'll be honest with you, I've always been interested in tubes ever since I was a kid, seeing those things glow in the back of the old TV set, so I guess that kind of dates myself. But anyway, I ran across this website. It's called Fun with Tubes. It's operated by a guy named Max Robinson. If I remember his bio correctly, he got his electrical engineering degree, his master's in '60s, sometime where tubes were still prevalent, transistors prevalent. Tubes were the thing at the time. Transistors were coming in, and he puts this thing up here, and he's got this, little moniker, keep the electrons flowing and the tubes glowing. So I wandered into this website just to see what it was all about, and I found there was a bunch of projects and places, things to learn, some basics, electricity, test instruments, how to do it. He kind of gave some how to solder, and it's just real basic stuff for those who have an interest. And he's got a section on radios, and I guess he's a ham guy. So again, this is in here. One of the things that I found myself very interested in was the amplifier part of this whole thing, and that's partially because I've always enjoyed listening to music. And as a kid, I remember growing up in the Detroit area, and the local bands would be practicing in their garage, and there was always this hum that came off the amplifiers, and just before they quieted down to start a new set or start a new song, you'd hear that hum, and there was always something good that came out of that. It's one of those associated things, the hum and good music. And anyway, so I found myself listening to music as a kid, growing up, finally retiring, and I happened across a couple other websites, and I bought a couple kits, and I built an amplifier or two based on tubes, and I had some transistor stuff laying around, and I was able to actually compare them back and forth. And I'll admit it, I'm a tube guy. I like the sound that comes off them, not that transistor, Class D systems can't provide. Just I like the glowing warmth. I found out later that was some of the harmonics that comes off the tubes. That same thing with guitar amps. That just something that I favor. I found this particular thing called PreAmp design, and he goes into, Max, basically designing and building audio amplifiers, and he gets into what a preamp is, nice definition. Down a little bit, he gives a block diagram of how you might want to build that thing and how you might want to structure your architecture. And again, it's something I had never really thought about. And what thing I like about this, he gives this little thing here. It's a verbal description, and then you click on that, and it opens up different opportunities, avenues to pursue, and it explains it in a way that people like myself, again, novice builders, can grab onto and start make sense of. I do this stuff for fun. I don't do it for a living. And one of the amplifiers, preamps, this is the one that I ended up building. He calls it a simple preamplifier. And I don't know where it came from, quite frankly, where it originated from. Again, I'm not sure, but he does some really neat things in here which show the basics of how these things work and how you would come in here from a selector switch, how you'd go to a volume knob, and you would go to some sort of tube that would increase the volume, the input signal, and then how it could come over to a tone stack. In this case, it's got a treble and a bass, and then that would float out of there to a balance control, and then these two parts of the triodes are set up as to amplify that, take it from a high impedance to a low impedance, and you basically would take that out, and that could feed into your your amplifier going to your speakers. And so this is the one that I actually grabbed onto first and built. He's got another one in here that he actually helped develop for me, and that's my next build after this one. And it has a treble and a mid-range and a bass control. You'll probably see that in an upcoming video as soon as I get all the parts on order and build it. So this is where I started from, one of many resources out there. And again, fun with tubes, good place to go. Check it out sometime. Rob has got a lot of materials out there, and one of the opening statements he made, and this is on a particular topic of guitar amp overdrive, like you might see in the old Marshalls. And he makes a statement here that Benjamin Franklin guessed wrong on the direction of electron flow. That was important because I remember looking at these diagrams. It's like, how does this work? It seems like it's going backwards, And so he came up with a variety of different explanations. I'm going to show you some in a second here. Probably one of the most, again, this is Rob Robinette, was the tube amp directory. These are just a glossary of terms that you run across when you're working on or doing a tube amp build, or maybe a repair, or just trying to figure out what they're doing. And again, it's all alphabetical order, and it's really good reading. I actually printed this stuff off and put it in a 3-ring binder. That's how anal I am. And have found myself looking back at some of this stuff, a good definition for impedance up here for those of us who just didn't understand that. And again, he goes through a good deal of explanations. And again, working with folks like myself, hobbyist, to try to better understand these things, to get an intuitive feel for this, in my case, hobby. Some people make a living out of this. I seem to have a lot of fun with it, and every now and then I get something done and it works, and it's such a, doesn't start on fire, or you don't get electrocuted when I plug it in, so those are bonuses. So anyway, I'm going to show you the project that we're going to be discussing here in a second. I wanted to make mention of another resource that I've drawn upon. It's a guy by the name of Merlin Blenco. You can see his name down there. I kind of draw into a little bit. These are just a couple of the books that he's got out. He's got a whole bunch of stuff, and the first one on the left-hand side there is designing power supplies. The other one is designing the two preamps for guitar and bass amps. And again, he's got other ones. This is the one in particular, the power supply, I learned quite a bit from. Grounding techniques. Again, on both books, he goes through a lot of really common sense stuff that if you haven't done this all your life, which I haven't, this is a good resource. Again, there's probably plenty more. This just happened to be the one I grabbed these couple books and took a highlighter to them and just went at them. And there's again, good resource to. So this is the backside rear panel view of the Max Robinson Fun with Tubes preamplifier, and this is the kind of a little quick view of the power supply that Max provided, and it's got a couple red little pots here that I can adjust so I can change my B plus voltage level based upon the load that I have, depending upon this particular power supply. He designed for 3 or 4 different preamps. I'm using a Hammond power transformer. I believe this is a 372DX. Again, real straightforward, nothing special. And then there's my outputs right in left hand, and I've got the one on this side is my main output. Then I actually have a resistor drop down here, so I can actually take this down to a powered sub. And again, I just put some hokey labels on there, so I go to a selector switch, and I fuse F1 as the mains, F2 is I actually fuse the what they call high tension, the high voltage DC, and I use a 120 volt IEC connector to make it all work. So this is what the back side of it looks like. I'm going to put up some of the schematics in the next segment so you can see where it all started from. I have made a few revisions from Max's first design that made it a little easier for me to do. The original design calls for using 3 12AX7 triodes. This is a picture of the Funwood Tubes Max Robinson, I think he calls it a simple preamp. And he does some really neat things in here. One of the problems I ran across is this particular resistor, this RC filter here, tended to, if you do the calculations on that, that's the inverse of 2 pi RC. Come to find out that is a high pass filter, at least from what I can tell of it, and ended up kind of making the thing sound tinny. So I modified that a little bit. Here he shows off that these are the 12AX7s in this particular drawing. Again, I found that to be a little heavy for what was going on downstream. So and something interesting here, he shows that only on this particular electrolytic capacitor here and this particular resistor I only show up on one, and I think that's to just eliminate some of the crosstalk. That's my guess anyway. So I modified this. I took this as it is. Again, I put it in CAD because that's what I work on most, and so I had pretty much built it the way it was. I changed this out to a 12AU7 for the first triode off the input. Again, the selector switch over here. I left the tone stack the same, I left the balance the same, and then as I moved over to the, I guess you would call these plate followers, because that's what they really are, taking something from a high impedance to a low impedance, and then of course this inverts it. I pretty much left most of that the same. Then I came across, and this is the final revision I actually built, and I didn't document this right away, but earlier this in February of 2025, I got rid of that little filter that we saw over here that's got the 47 picofarad and the 270K, and I just basically stripped off the cap on that. Then there was a little following around loop that is over here. I got rid of that too. So again, I made it fairly straightforward. Went to a 12AU7 and pretty much just ran that. I dropped down the lead resistor off B1 from 270K to 100K, and it really seemed to work well. I got my plate voltages back up to a reasonable area. The tone stack is actually kind of interesting, and even the balance he did here, it's really a neat little, this is a Max thing right here. He did a really nice job of designing that. It was a little bit hard to find a 250K linear pot that had a decent in it. Typically you might see these things without the two 120K resistors on either side. Obviously you could find a 500K, because if you add it all up that's what it comes out to. But this is what I end up building, and it actually worked out pretty well. It sounds good. I got some nice low end, some nice high frequency response. The next one I'm going to build, he come up with another design that's got a treble, mid-range, and bass control, and I'm going to try my hand at that one and see how that might work out. So this is what I built that you saw previously that was on the bench. The mistakes I made in this were how I handled taking the cathode drops, any sort of other drop to chassis from the balance or the tone stack, or the cathodes over here for the plate follower. I didn't do a good job of handling those things probably as best I could, and it kind of went back to a guy named Merlin Blenko. I think I showed a book in his earlier video of some of the grounding techniques that he describes, and so I kind of went back to that, rewired a little bit, and I've got a little bit of noise in one of the channels, and I'm not sure if I've got a bad capacitor sitting there somewhere. I'm gonna take another look at it, and sometimes it takes 2 or 3 tries. Again, I'm a hobbyist. I don't do this stuff for a living, and I know if I keep looking at it I'll figure it out, and that's the fun of doing this sort of stuff, at least for me. So this is the preamp. We're going to be talking about this a little bit more in the next segment. In this segment we'll just take a look at some of the development pictures for the simple stereo preamp. This is kind of where we started with the basic enclosures, chassis, using a hole saw here to put some socket holes in there, and so you can kind of just going to flow through this fairly quickly to see how it all kind of came to be. Did the back side, and then this is a quick shot of the black boards, turret boards, and the way this thing is set up. I've got the boards are stacked on top of each other like that, and I think the right hand channel is on top, the left hand channel is in the bottom. I did expand this space between here because the components are pretty tight to the underside. I did that a little later. Again, starting to mount some components per the schematic and the layout CAD. This is a board for the power supply, the adjustable power supply. Wiring up some sockets, mounting the black boards inside the chassis. That's kind of what it looks like all together. I'll float through these fairly quick, but this is what it entailed to put this whole thing together. The mount holes, the back holes there on the back side are for the unbalanced RCAs. On the left hand side, these are all the inputs, and on the right hand side, those are the outputs. Got the transformer mounted, power supply in. Then I found this company that I can take a drawing of CAD or a PDF basically, and they can develop these labels for me. A sticky back thing, real simple, straightforward, fairly inexpensive. The only drawback to them, quite frankly, is that you have to buy in quantity. So, you know, I think the minimum quantity is like 5 or 10 or something like that, but they're so inexpensive. So, just a nice look. Again, I'm not real flashy at this stuff. I built this one just to see if I could do it. There's the underside of it, and some more shots of it. And it looks like I'm getting ready. I got the sockets all wired out, and I'm starting to wire some of the inputs. Now I notice, if you can, probably can't see this too well, but I had made the mistake of daisy chaining these particular ones together. It's something that you don't want to do for inputs, and these are not isolated. These are the inputs. They were not isolated at this time, nor were the outputs at the time. I came and did a little bit of that later. Again, more components being loaded on the top board, the right-hand channel. And this is kind of similar to what we've seen in some guitar builds I've done, where you build the, I'm talking Marshall here, the ST1 board in particular. You build this up, you set out, and then you load them into the chassis and you start to wire them in. It's a little time-consuming, a lot of double checking and rechecking and seeing if everything is right, and on occasion you have to change things up. So this is kind of, again, further development as to how this thing got put together. And then that's the, then I use a simple tape labeler on the backside and clear tape, so I can put down my I didn't have a label made for the backside. It just at the time I thought I could probably make it look relatively clean by doing what I did. This is actually when I first got it running, this is actually a Dynaco or Dynakit ST70 right here. Probably one of the first kits I ever built. Some old Polk audios, which I don't even know what I did with anymore. I think I sold them to a neighbor. And that's kind of what it looked like. It sounded okay. It had a couple problems with some hum. One of the channels, I had changed some filtering on the treble side of it. It was a little tinny, so I was able to go back in there, and that's one nice thing about doing something on a turret board. You can pull components off and change them to give you different characteristics in the filter for like a treble circuit or a bass for that fact. And this is kind of what it looks like when it finally got a little closer to being put together. And this is pretty close to being a final product. By this time I had made enough changes on it, found a couple of mistakes I'd made, and was able to rectify those. Got the hum out of it. That's the frontal view of it. I got some JJs in here right now. These just happen to be, I use JJ for a lot of guitar amp builds. The guitarists love those things. They're really got a good concentrated frequency response in the mid-range. Okay, they're not great at highs, they're not great at lows. And in this segment, we're going to take a look at the finished product of the Max Robinson PreAmp that I built. And I'm just going to kind of go in here really quick. I had done the build with the two boards, and the right hand channel is on top and the black board underneath. It's kind of hard to see in there. It's the other channel, left hand channel on the bottom. And isolated outputs. You can kind of see the power supply down here. The adjustable one that Max came up with for us to do other projects. Again, I've already mentioned most of this. So this is what it turned out to be. I'm going to hook it up to a scope just to put a signal in there just to see how it looks like, and we'll take a look at the results of that in the next segment. Okay, this is the preamplifier that I built, and what I've done is I put it up on I have a real simple signal generator there. I think I've got it at 6 kilohertz, 1.5 volts amplitude, and then I put it on have a real simple scope next to it. It's kind of hard to see. I'm going to lift the camera up and get a little better view of that. And it's real straightforward. It's a sine wave. I've got both of them coming in at the same amplitude, so I'm going to drop this down a little bit. So you can see on the scope a little bit there. I can change my input voltage, change the amplitude, my volume, and then if I play around with the volume here or the balance, you can see how the left hand channel and right hand channel can go around each other quite nicely. Got a reasonably clean signal out of it. There's a little bit of a buzz in the left channel, which I'm still working on getting out. I'm not exactly sure why it's there, but then again, if I did, it's just something I'll work out. I'll find where I maybe got a wire too close to something else, or I've got a leaky capacitor or something that is a little bit out of tolerance. But for the most part, it works pretty good. I have hooked it up to a receiver and a set of speakers, and it actually sounds pretty good. I get good treble response out of it. I get good bass response out of it. You really can't see the treble responses. I'm just on a scope here, but all that said and done, we'll call this project done and move on to the next one. So again, Pete from GS2, have a nice day out there. Keep working at this stuff. It's a lot of fun.